Hey everybody, this is Scott Kearney, the CEO and founder of PositiveEarth.com. We are essentially looking to connect sustainable startups with the resources necessary to scale. Joel, welcome and thank you for joining us today. Let's get into it. Do you want to tell us what Cleanhub is all about?
We're trying to build an economy where plastic is too valuable to waste. What that means is we are really trying to give all plastic a value or enough value that it is collected and will subsequently be treated correctly. Because that's the only way how we really see that we can get a grip on plastic pollution. Because in the end, you won't throw away what is valuable, right? We apply more or less the same market mechanisms as we see in the carbon markets to plastic. So we're issuing plastic credits, and we've developed software basically to really track and trace the collection of plastic as proof of work that we do remove it from the environment. And then we have other companies pay for the collection of plastic in the end. So if we look at the numbers today, the newest studies suggest that around 11 to 14 million tons enter the ocean every single year, tons of plastic. And this number is expected to triple until 2040. And the reasons for that are pretty simple. It's like we will see an increase in prosperity in the world, and we will see an increase of population. So more and more people will consume. That means that there will be more plastic produced in the first place. If we don't start to fix the problem, obviously the more plastic will be produced, the more plastic will enter the oceans. So that's the size of the problem, so to say. The majority of plastic or the majority of packaging is not designed for a circular economy. So everything that goes into the shelves today, or not everything, but the majority that goes on the shelves today is designed for a linear economy. That means it cannot be recycled. And that is also pretty clear in the numbers. Around 80% of all plastic that goes into the oceans can be classified as unrecyclable or non-recyclable.
Wow, 80%.
80%.
And
the reasons for that is two things. It's like for some of the material, it just doesn't make economic sense. It's like even if you would collect it and then recycle it, you wouldn't find a buyer that pays for the entire collection process in the first place.
There's some inefficiency in that, right?
Inefficiencies and lack of market, because a secondary material, or if you recycle a material, it is difficult to get to the same quality level as if you produce it completely from scratch. What needs to be known about plastic, it's kind of an umbrella term, right? If we speak about plastic, we all think of the water bottle, we all think of the shampoo bottle that we maybe have, but there's literally thousands of different types of plastics. It's like not all metal is metal. But we have these subcategories, right? Plastic is a chemical product. It's a synthetic product that is designed for specifically the use case that you want it to.
That's an important point, right? Plastic is a completely man-made problem.
Absolutely. It goes so far, if you have a juice bottle, that's a different kind of plastic than you would find, for example, or it has a different plastic formula than what you would find in a water bottle. And even in a water bottle, if it's sparkling water, you will have a different plastic formula, so to say, to still water, right? Because if you're sparkling water, it's always about protecting the contents that is inside the packaging. And the packaging gets designed specifically for protecting the ingredients and not for being recyclable.
So that's a big challenge to solve for across the board, because these different chemical components, it doesn't all decompose even in the same way.
The utilization is more the issue. Like, yes, plastic does decompose, but then it breaks down into microplastic, and it takes several hundred years until it breaks down. So the problem really is making sure that what you did produce can actually be recycled, right? And usually we're speaking of a downcycling process more than a real recycling process. So think 2% of all plastic that was ever produced was recycled within the same application, so that a bottle is turned into a bottle again.
Yes.
In both cases, you even need to add virgin material, virgin plastics into a recycled bottle as well, that it has the same product performance. You can turn a plastic bottle into, clothing, for example. It's a very, very complex problem, because nobody uses plastic to annoy anyone or to be a burden on the environment, but it has the reason to protect the contents of what it is made for, and then it really turns into a problem once it did its job. I was born at Lake Constance in Germany, and I was fortunate enough to grow up sailing basically my entire childhood. And so I developed this love for the water sports. After my graduation, I started surfing, not very good, but passionately. And that also led to the fact that I was traveling quite a bit. And whenever you went anywhere, you were always confronted with plastic pollution. And especially in the surfing community, it's a big topic, right? And at some point, I basically hit a bit of a quarter life crisis. I was working in a software startup before, where I realized that I don't care that much about the actual product that we were building, about the actual problem that we were solving, and really decided to do something that means something to me, where I have a deep desire to really solve the problem. And there was plastic pollution, and there was also the same time when my co-founders and I got together, and after really doing a lot of desk research on the problem and really understanding what plastics are and what the challenges in plastic pollution are, we decided that we can't really solve the problem from our desks through theory, but that we really also need to go where the problem occurs. So we boarded a plane, went to India and Sri Lanka, and went on a 2 or 3 month trip basically, where we spoke to the entire industry, where we really went to the landfills, where we visited prospective waste to energy plants, where we talked to recycling companies. What we saw goes into the same direction as what I just described. There's certain types of plastic that are collected. Basically, you can say all rigid plastic, like water bottles, shampoo bottles, these get collected. And all the flexible packaging, like foils, multi-layer packaging, these are left behind. Nobody collects them because, again, there's just no recycling use case. So there's no value on it, right? You wouldn't find anyone who would buy that material off from you. And that's really where we saw the point of intervention. You can see I'm wearing a Patagonia hat. I really like the company. And I especially like the vision of Yvon Chouinard, the founder. And in one of his interviews, he said, look, nothing that is man-made will ever be sustainable. It's like our existence in the end is unsustainable, right? Like everything we do produces a carbon footprint and whatever.
And consumes.
And consumes, yeah. And I might misquote him here lightly, but he said in the end where his quote led to is, once we accept the fact that nothing will ever be sustainable, we can start to take action to become as sustainable as we can, right? And that's exactly what we see in plastic pollution. It's like, obviously, plastic is around for a specific reason, which again is to protect what we buy. Is like we are in such a convenient,
what we consume.
We're so used to this convenience, just going to the store, grabbing something off the shelf. This is our habit nowadays, and to change that at the pace that we would need to change, I believe is impossible. So we need to find something that can intervene now, that works now, and then we can still work to a better system. Sustainability is this long way, and nothing that we will ever do is fully sustainable. It's just more.
It's a big part of that requires accountability, I guess.
Exactly. That's also where the business model comes in. The really encouraging thing is that consumers really start to put their money where their mouth is. They demand sustainable actions from brands. They demand from brands that they do more than just profit. They demand from them that, we're basically saving our planet, right? And
here's a shift, right? There's definitely people pushing actively to say that is not okay, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Consuming on I guess consuming at the sacrifice of our planet, of our
Exactly.
oceans.
That's essentially what's going on right now. I think a lot of founders of new companies, especially in the direct-to-consumer space, are thinking the same way. They know that they want to do as little harm as possible with the businesses that they start from their own very personal motivation. And at the same time, they also know that there's a target audience out there that cares about it. But if I'm a company in Germany, for example, what can I do to prevent plastic pollution? I mean, obviously, what I can do is to reduce my plastic footprint as much as possible, but I can't really do anything against the ocean plastic problem that everybody cares about. And that's where we come in and say, okay, what we do is we basically offer you the chance to take action in coastal communities around the globe to help to set up the required structure to catch plastic before it goes into the ocean in the first place, right? Because that's essentially what we need to do. We need to catch the plastic as close to the consumer as possible before it can even leak into the environment.
It's
before
an intervention you were talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what we do is we partner up with companies and NGOs on the ground that run, for example, household collection services for dry waste, or also technical projects where they build barriers into rivers. When we observed that this non-recyclable plastic is a problem, we started talking to exactly the partners that we're working with today and said, look, would you collect non-recyclable plastic if we would pay you? And they said, yes, sure, but what are you going to do with it? Okay, we're going to find a solution. And what we knew from Germany is we closed all our landfills because they have quite negative long-term effects also. And this is where we have to be a bit careful. I'm not saying that incinerating waste is a good thing, or that turning waste into energy is a good thing, but this is where we are at the same point where we were earlier, is like, what is the more sustainable option? What we do in the end is we take this plastic waste and supply it to the industry, mostly the cement industry, who can use the non-recyclable, like again, the non-recyclable plastic, not something that you can turn into a new product, but the non-recyclable part, which is turned into a fuel because it has calorific value, and it replaces coal and gas in the process of cement manufacturing. This costs money as well, like turning this material into fuel and making sure that that the emissions are controlled is costing money. So there's, even if we deliver it to the cement industry, they don't pay us to bring
Give
it.
them fuel.
So we have to pay the people who collect, we have to pay the people who sort, we have to pay for logistics, and we have to pay for disposal. And that's a horrible business model. And
well, I guess it takes us back to accountability, right? So who is putting that product out in the market? And do you think that that's where we're heading? Do you think that we'll have that level of accountability in the industry?
Yes. And that's exactly where we see when we talk about the opportunity again, right? This is where we see the short-term opportunity. The brands are under pressure. They are lacking alternatives. At the same time, consumers pressure them to take action. And what we in the end offer is that, for example, for every piece of packaging that they bring into the market, we can make sure to collect the exact equivalent in high impact areas where there's no waste management.
So that's a one-for-one model that you're working on in impact to revenue.
Exactly. Then again, the accountability part is we need to be transparent about these things, right? This is where software comes in again. So this is where some threads in the story come together. We built an app that collection companies on the ground can use to really track and trace the material from collection all the way to the final endpoint, including all weighment slips, images of the trucks that are leaving and coming in. So the material needs to always check in and check out at some place. And this transparency then also can be communicated towards the consumer that they are really doing something, right? Because it should not be seen as greenwashing, but there's actual action going on the ground.
You're bringing this big tech mindset to solving sustainable issues, and there's value in that. And that's what you guys are selling. I think the hardest part for any company to take accountability for their challenges within the company, not even considering recycling or pollution, but it's tracking, right? So having the correct metrics to understand how you're doing to be able to respond within that challenge, right, or environment.
And that's also what's going to be required to scale, because in the end, what it comes down to, if we speak very openly, it's about compliance. no company would write a check and then just hope that things get better, right? But it is about making these systems as compliant as possible. And that goes in regards of monitoring. So really documenting the volumes that you move. And that also goes into the direction of labor standards that need to be improved in these chains. These are the two big parts that we focus on.
What are your challenges to scale?
The resource that we require is something that you can't immediately buy, which is trust. And again, that's what we try to do, or that's what we try to solve with the software to bring in the necessary transparency. And the funny thing is, and that's usually the first question is like, how do you acquire partners? And that's not a problem at all. It's like, there's so much waste out there, and we basically get requests for projects now every single day. NGOs that do cleanups, whatever. What we really need to do, or what we really need, is companies stepping up and say, yes, we also put our money where our mouth is, and we have brilliant brand partners who are already doing that. Also, a lot of them actually from the community that doesn't even use plastic in the first place. But
so you have companies buying into this cause, even though they know that that's not even their accountability. But I guess as consumers, it's all of our accountability as well. But ideally, to achieve scale and really make impact is to go to the input, go to the source and affect that.
Absolutely. And in a certain way, I know that this is going to be a public interview, but I still want to be very, in the end, what we are doing is we're working against a very strong narrative that was mainly put into, and there's great articles, especially, for example, by the NPR. We're working against an extremely strong narrative from the oil and gas industry that is basically pushing the message since decades that plastic can be recycled, and it's not. We're shipping our plastic waste away from Europe, we're shipping it away from the US, and we don't do that because it's so valuable, but it's exactly the opposite reason, because it's not valuable. We're shipping it to countries where there's no infrastructure in place. We're shipping it to China. They shut it down. And suddenly this whole issue really popped up for the first time. And that's the other point. I don't want to exclude anyone from the responsibility. Me as a consumer,
Absolutely.
I have as much responsibility as a company. And at the same time, the narrative that is out there and that is pushed is always to push the responsibility on the consumer. It's like, well, then just don't buy the products or sort your waste better. It's like, obviously sort the waste as good as you can, but it's also time for the companies to step up and take the responsibility.
It's an easy excuse.
Exactly. And I can just ask anyone to try and reduce plastic as much as possible.
Absolutely.
At the same time, stay critical about new packaging alternatives as well, because not everything that is pushed into the market is necessary. There's this hierarchy of reduce, reuse, recycle, and there's actually the fourth R that is above all, and that is refuse. So if you can replace plastic somehow in your everyday life, I can only encourage you to do it. I mean, and that's a great trend. You see so many people walking around with a metal bottle, for example, or with a glass bottle and just filling it up at a spring. And that is amazing. So trying to use less plastic is definitely the first step that you can go. At the same time, we are human, right? Sometimes you will forget your water bottle and then you will just buy one at the supermarket.
Absolutely.
It's also something that we need to accept. Is like, it will not be perfect, but we can try to be better. And the second thing, and that's almost too much to ask for from any kind of consumer, and actually I'm hoping for some good standards there, is we shouldn't be too quick to judge anyone who's using plastic in their packaging, because if you look at it from a life cycle analysis perspective, it can be the better material over other alternatives. It can be better than paper. It can be better than if you have
many considerations to the problem that we're perceiving, right?
Exactly. So if you would, for example, have a single-use glass application and you want to recycle the glass, it takes 1,200 degrees to melt down glass. If the circular economy would, then in many cases, plastic could be the better alternative.
Yeah. And I think that is the debate that continues, is that, how sustainable is sustainability? I think this is the forefront of innovation, and innovation does not mean perfection. It means the next best alternative of the next best alternative. And we just need to keep iterating.
And if you're a brand owner or if you're a company owner and you want to do something, it's like, I'm happy if you reach out, because that's in the end the only thing that will really drive the change.
Joel, amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and all the best for you guys with your venture, and keep fulfilling your purpose. To join the sustainability startup movement and to connect with founders, investors, and other activists, head over to positiveearth.com and sign up to the latest news on how sustainable startups are changing the world.